Hey everyone, welcome back to Wix I hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Ryan and today's video is another episode of our e-commerce mini-series. Now, for the first video of this part in the series, I showed you guys how to design your custom product page. However, I am not very good at code, so we're bringing on Eitan from the WixWiz YouTube channel. Of course, I'm going to leave the link to his channel in the description below. I really ask that you guys go subscribe to his channel. He is a Velo genius. But Eitan is going to be here for the next several episodes in this series to help bring that design that I made to life. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton over to Eitan, and he's going to show you how it's done.
Okay, so now that we've set up our product options in the drop-down repeater and inside of our selection tags, what we're going to do now is discuss several of the custom product page elements that might need to change based on a change in those options. So if I select a certain choice from one of these options, that might trigger a certain change on the page, such as, for example, changing the main media to reflect media that's unique to a specific option, or for example, changing the price or the SKU to match a specific variant that we've selected. And before we hop into the code, I just want to show you in the dashboard which data points we're talking about, because this may or may not be relevant to your specific case depending on how you've set up your products. Let me just hop over to one example product here, and you'll see here first of all that this product has several options. So that's going to be one factor here that will determine if this is relevant for you. So if you have several options for your product, if your product has no options at all, then this and probably the previous episode as well were not too relevant for you. In addition to that, if you want to display unique media in the main media, depending on the option that's selected, then you'll have to go ahead and connect images to specific options that you have here. So that's just a matter of going over here and clicking either edit or connect images, and then selecting the specific option you want to connect to. For example, here, I have already associated specific images with the different color options, so I'll be able to tap into those into the code and display this media specifically when somebody selects a specific color. In addition to that, I have also set up different variants for my products. So that was done by selecting here Manage Pricing and Inventory for each product variant. And then I went in and I set different prices for each variant and different SKUs for each variant. And that's because that's my needs for my current store. But again, if your product is the same price for for all the variants, then obviously you don't need to change the price when somebody selects a different option. But if you do have different pricing for different variants or different SKUs or other data points that you want to reflect, such as in and out of stock, then this is for you. So let's now hop over to our IDE and talk about how we'll implement this using code. Okay, so this is all the code that we've written so far for our custom product page. And in order to facilitate this current feature that we want to add, we're going to start declaring some global variables. And these are variables that are going to be accessible throughout all of our code. And that's because we want to track certain changes and access data based on those changes without having to load all of our product data again. And also because we're going to need to use, for example, which options were selected from each dropdown later on when we add the product to cart, etc. So that's why we're starting to set up some global variables now. And as a first step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to extract all of the places that we get this product. So what we've been doing until now is that we've been getting the product and the product data again and again and again every time that we ran a new function. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to extract this into a global variable. And global variables we declare up here at the very top of our code. And I'm going to call that let product. And initially it won't be defined at all, but what we're going to do is that when we first get our product inside the populate product data function, what we're going to do is we are going to store that product data here inside of the product, and then we're just going to use it again and again and again throughout all of our code. So let me go ahead and do that. So I'm going to scroll down here to where we get populate product data, and instead of saying const product, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to store this inside of the global variable for the product. Okay, and then throughout the rest of our code, so wherever we're getting the product again, instead what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of this line, and we already have access to the product because we're storing it in a global variable. And we'll do the same thing right over here. Okay, so that's a first step, and I'm just doing that because we need to set up global variables anyways, so this is a good point to introduce that change. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create another global variable for the selected options. And this is where we're going to store information about which options we've selected for our product, and this is going to be an object. Okay, so I'm already assigning it an empty object. And basically what we're going to do here is that each item in the object is going to have a property which is the option. Okay, so for example, size, scent, color, etc. And then the value is going to be what the user selects from that specific dropdown or selection tags. And now what we need to do is essentially set it up so that whenever we have a change to one of our options, what we're going to do is we're going to store the data for that selected option inside of this selected options collection, and we're going to run a function which updates our product page, our custom product page, based on the changes that were made. So the first thing that I'm going to do is start off by defining a new function, and I'm going to do that here right under our populate options function, and I'm going to call this function update product page with options. Let's call it that. You can call it whatever you want, but this will basically update our product page based on the options that have been selected. And what we're going to do here inside of this function is initially all I'm going to do is I'm going to console.log product options. Selected options. Okay, that's initially what we're going to do inside of this function. Later on, what we're going to do inside this function is we are going to get a variant based on the options. Okay, that's what we're going to do over here. And we're also going to display main media if relevant from a selected option. So that's what's going to be happening in this function later on. But initially, I just want to log the selected options and make sure that we're actually keeping track of the changes as we expect. And the way that we're going to keep track of those changes is, first of all, here inside of the onItemReady for our drop-down options repeater. So every time that we make a change to one of these option drop-downs, we're going to want to update our selected options. So I'm going to add that in right over here inside of the onItemReady for the repeater. And I'm going to select item options dropdown and option dropdown without the S. And I'm going to say that on change. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say that selected options. And here within the selected options, we're going to have the specific name of this option. So we're going to have here item data.name. So that's the property that we're tapping into. And we're going to say that that should be equal to the specific choice that has been made. So in that case, we could just say that it'll be the event. Okay, so here we're going to have an event, and it'll be equal to event.target.value. And this value is essentially equal to this choice.description. Okay, so that's what we're going to have over here. So that's good for our options dropdown inside the repeater. If you've also set up selection tags, then we'll need to set that up separately. So that means here up on top, so right above where we've defined the options repeater, and essentially we've created the selection tags, what I'm going to do is also put an on change for the selection tags. So let me just go and zoom in right over here. And I'm going to select those selection options, selection tags. What did I spell wrong this time? Oh, I didn't put the pound sign. So dot on change, and here we're also going to have event. And what we're going to do here is we're going to say that selected options. And then here we know that this is definitely going to be size. Okay, so here we're just going to have size. And then we can say that that should be equal to the event.target.value. Okay, so similar, we just need to single out this case because it won't be handled within our repeater. Now that we've set those up, the next thing that I want to do is that in both of these cases, after we make the change to the option, I want to call the new function that we defined, which is going to update the product page with the options, based on the options. So let me go ahead and just call that function right over here. So I'm going to say update product page with options, and I'm going to call it again right over here, update product page with options. Okay, and now that we've done that, we can go ahead and test and see what will happen when we make those changes to the options. So here I am back in the editor, and let's just go into preview mode. And we're loading product 3, which I had set up. So we see we have the two options here, one for scent and one for color. And we also have the selection tags. So let's just go ahead and see here inside the developer console what happens when I make a change to one of these. So I'm going to go ahead and select lavender from here. And let's take a look and see if our code ran. So let's take a look here. And here we can see inside of the selected options that we have scent lavender. And if I go ahead and I select now, let's say brown, and then I select, let's say 8 Oz, and here you can see that the function ran twice. So the first time we have lavender and brown, and here for the size, so I see that it actually put in an array for the selection tags, which highlights an interesting point that we need to fix for the selection tags. And that is that in selection tags, you can select more than one option, as you can see here. So that's not something that we want to allow within these selection tags. So that's a small thing that we'll have to fix. But in general, we can see that our option selection is working. So before we continue with our selected options, let's first fix that small problem that we had with the selection tags. And the way we're going to do that is by isolating the most recent selection, which will be the last item in the array of the selection tags. So let me head over back to our IDE. And this is actually the perfect time to implement this fix because we've already set up the onChange, and that's exactly where we're going to want to add this extra logic. So let me zoom right in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to define a new variable that will be our current selection for the selection tags. And this will also be equal to event.target.value, but I'm going to isolate the final item in the array by saying that it should be equal to event.target.value.length. Okay, so the length of the entire array minus 1. Okay, so that will be our current selection, the last one that has been selected. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to empty out our selections. So I'm going to make it so that nothing is currently selected. So I'm going to say here that options, let me copy over the name here so I make as few mistakes as possible. So options selection tags dot value, and I'm going to assign it an empty array. So essentially nothing will be selected in our selection tags. And then I'm going to just assign it the value of our current selection. Okay, so I'm going to assign it a value of current selection. And now that I think of it, I could probably even cut out this line of code. So let me comment it out for now because I think I might not need it. But if we do, then I'll return it later on. And once we have assigned this current selection to the selection tags, now visually we'll be able to see the current selection, and I can assign that current selection to our size value as well. Okay, so I think it might be a little hard to understand as I walk through it now, but I think once you see visually what we've set up, it'll be a lot more clear. So let's head over to the editor, zoom right out here and head back to the editor, and let's head back into preview mode. And awesome. So I've changed the selection tags to not display any selection by default, and that's easily done through the editor settings. And now let's see what happens here inside of our developer console once I select, for example, 12. Okay, so it's displaying 12, which is fine because I only selected 1, so that's not a big catch yet. But let's see what happens when I select 6. You can see that 12 goes away, and now 6 is selected, and the same for 8, 6, 12. And now let's just double check and see what the value is that's being passed into our selected options. So let me go right over here, and you can see that it's not in an array anymore, and there's only one, and it's the last one that I selected. And that's true for each one of the selections that I made. Okay, so now our selected options are complete, and whenever we change any of the options, we have a nice object which aggregates all of the current selections that the user has made, and we can use those inside of our function in order to get the variant and make any changes necessary on the custom product page. Okay, so now that we are keeping track of the options that the user has selected, what we need to do is get a variant based on that selection. And we're going to do that using this getProductVariance function, which is part of the Wix Store's backend API. And essentially what this function does is it takes a product ID and it takes the options for the product, and then it provides us with all of the variants that match those specific selections from that product. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy over this boilerplate code, and I'm going to go back into our IDE. And since this needs to be implemented in the backend, I'm going to need to create a new backend file. So I'm going to do that right over here in the Explorer. I'm going to go here into backend, and I'm going to add in a new file. And let's just call this store.jsw. And I'm defining a JSW file here because this is code that we're going to need to import into our front end. I'll just make a small note here that Wix is in the process of introducing a new type of backend file, except for JSW, which has a different way of handling the permissions of access to backend functions. But because it's quite new and it's only just being introduced, I'm going to use the JSW format, which has been the norm for the past while. Okay, just so that we're using something that we know is trusted and working. And JSW will still continue working even alongside these new file type for the foreseeable future. So let's go ahead and paste in our boilerplate code over here. And we can get rid of most of this. So this is the page code. So this is important because it shows us how to set up the options, for example. So we have options as an object, and within that we have choices. So that's going to be useful for us in a moment. But this mostly we're going to build out by ourselves on the front end. So I'm going to get rid of most of this over here. And this we can also get rid of. And I'm going to comment this out because we might use it in a moment. And let's get rid of this. And I'm going to go ahead and this is already pretty much set up like we need to. So essentially it's a function called getProductVariance, and it uses Wix Store backend.getProductVariance. So that's pretty much set up. There's really not much that we need to change here. And we just need to pass in the product ID and the options for this to work. So let's go ahead and import this inside of our front end. So I'm going to go over here back to our product page, and imports go right here on the very, very top, even above our global variables. So, whoops. I'm going to go ahead and import get product variants, not from Wix stores, but from backend/stores. Okay, so this function that we set up ourselves, and we're going to be calling this function inside of the new function that we created, which is update product page with options. And right over here, under where I said get a variant based on the options, we can say that const variance equals 2. And this is going to be an asynchronous function, so that requires us to use await and also to update our function to be asynchronous. So I'm going to say here async function, and here we're going to say await get product variance. And first of all, we need to pass in the product ID. So that is going to be product dot, and let me just double check inside of the structure of our product data what that ID is going to look like. So here we have SEO data. Let's see, so here we have ID. So it's underscore ID. That's what we're going to be using over here as well. Okay, so product dot ID. And for the product options, we're going to have, first of all, an object. And within that object, we are going to have choices. And those choices are essentially going to be the selected options. Okay, so that's all set up. And I'm just going to add in a console log so we can see what those variants actually look like once we get them back from the backend. So let's add in here console.log. And I'm going to add in variance and variance. Awesome. So now we're ready to do some testing. And since preview mode seems not to be working now on my computer, I am going to go ahead and show you how this looks on the live site. So here I am on the live site, and I'm happy that I decided to try this because I actually discovered why it probably wasn't loading in preview mode. And that is because I have this error here, cannot find module backend/stores in public, etc. And hopping back into the IDE and just double checking the name here of my backend file, it's store.jsw and not stores. So just like almost 90% of the bugs in coding, it is a typo. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this store, and I'm going to publish my site again, and let's check out what I was going to check out originally, which is that we were getting the variants. Okay, so here we are back on the live site, and let's test this out by making a change to the scent options. So I'm going to go ahead and select lavender, and we can see here that our selected options has updated to scent lavender. And I also got back 9 different variants, which include the option of lavender. And that's because lavender can go with 3 different color options, and it can also go with 3 different size options. That's 3 times 3, that's 9. And you'll see that as I select different options, the variants that come back will become less and less, till finally there should really only be 1 variant that matches all the selections. So let's say if I match here lavender and brown, so I got back 3, and let's say if I add that detail of 6 Oz, then we see here that we get back the final variant that matches that. And we see here the choices that have been made, and we see data here about the variant itself. Okay, so we can see the currency, we can see discounted price, formatted price, and SKU. And essentially what we'll be doing now is we'll be taking this data and updating the UI of our product page with the data of this variant. One condition that we're going to need to add into this is that we're only going to change the UI assuming we get back 1 variant from our getVariance function. Because if we have multiple variants, then those different variants might have different prices, so we're not really sure which one to display. So let's go ahead back into the IDE and add in this update of our UI based on the variant that we got back. Okay, so here we are back in the IDE, and essentially we're going to be adding in another few lines of code here, which will take the data from the variant and populate the elements in our UI based on the updated variant. So because we've already populated these elements once, I already have a lot of this code pre-written up down here. Okay, so here we have original price.txt and discounted price.txt, and we have the product SKU. So I'm going to copy over some of these lines of code just to save us a little time and also save me from making typos in all of the element names, etc. And I'm going to put that right over here. Obviously, there's still some fixing up that we need to do. So first of all, we're not going to be updating the ribbon and the product ribbon based on the variant. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those. And in addition, we're going to be using not the product, but the variant data. So let me zoom in right here. And first of all, let's say that if our variance dot length is bigger than 1, I'm going to return from this function. So I'm going to exit this function and we're not going to do anything else. And that's the condition that I had mentioned earlier. After we know that we only have one variant, I'm going to say that const variant, and I'm going to extract the variant variable. So variant equals to variance 0. Okay, because if we only have one item inside of the array, then that will be in the index 0. And this variant variable is what we saw right over here. So you saw that inside of the item in the array, we had this variable variant right over here. And that's essentially what I'm extracting out so that we have direct access to all of these properties. So now that we have access to these properties, I can just say that here, instead of product, we're going to have variant, and we're going to have variant, and we're going to have variant. Okay, and that should be enough in order to update our UI based on these changes. So let me go ahead and publish our site because I started working on the live site and I'm enjoying it. So let's head over to here, and I'm just going to go ahead and refresh. And I'm going to change some of the options. Let's select 3 random options. Awesome. Now you can see that the pricing and the SKU updated. I guess that this doesn't have a discounted price. Otherwise, this would have displayed the original price as well. And you'll see here if I change this, then we get a new variant that comes in. Change this, a new variant comes in. Change this, a new variant comes in. I guess those were priced similarly. Change this, a new variant comes in. Okay, so that's how to implement the changing of certain UI elements on your custom product page based on the change in different variants and different selected options. And the last thing I'm going to show you is just how to change this main media based on an option that was selected. And in our case, it's going to be based on the selection of one of the colors, because that is the option or a set of options for which we have set up custom images. Okay, so back here in our IDE, before we start writing any code, I just want to do a quick review of the data structure of our product options. So if you recall, within the product options, we had properties for each individual option, and within those individual options, we had choices. And for each choice, we had a main media and also media items. For now, we're only showing an example of how to use main media, but you could technically do the same by repopulating the individual media items as well. So what we need to do is that when one of our options is changed, we need to check if within our selected options we have color. And if we have color, we need to extract the current choice that has been made and get the main media for it. So let's hop in and do that now. So I'm going to be implementing this above where we get the variance inside of this function. And the first thing I'm going to do is get the color from our selected options. So it's going to be selected options color. And then this color will be the value of whichever color has been selected, or it will be undefined if no color has been selected. Then I'm going to check if indeed we have a color that has been selected. And if we did, then we'll conditionally run all the code that I'm about to write. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to get the color option from our product options. So I'm going to say const color option equals to, and then we're going to have product options, and we're going to tap in specifically to color. And then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to filter down the choices to match the color that we specifically chose here. So I'm going to say here const selected choice equals to product color option dot choices dot filter, and we're going to filter it so that we have the choice where the choice, let me make sure you can see what I'm actually writing here, choice dot description is equal to color. Okay, so that will filter down and only give us that selected choice. And within that selected choice, I'm just going to tap into 0 because this is essentially an array and I just want selected choice to be an object. Once we have that selected choice, what we can do now is we can say that the main media will be the selected choice dot main media, and we can associate that with our main media element. So main media dot source will be equal to selected choice dot main media. And I'm just going to add in some console logs just to make sure, for the case that if it's not working, it'll be easier to debug later on. So let's go ahead and first let's log our color option, console.log color option. And let me add a little tag here so we know what it is, color option. And then let's also log our selected choice. So console.log selected choice, selected choice. And of course, if this is all working, we don't need those logs, but better safe than sorry. So let me zoom out right now, and I'm going to go ahead and publish these changes. You could also check this in preview mode, but it's even quicker to publish and check in the live site than to sometimes view preview mode in Wix. So I'm going to head over here to the live site, and I'm going to go ahead and refresh that. And basically to test this, all we need to do is to really change the color dropdown. So let me go ahead and choose beige, and boom. So you can see that we changed our main media to be the beige main media that we set up in the very beginning inside of our dashboard. And if I go ahead and I change to brown, then we'll see brown. Obviously, these products are completely unrelated and random and not related. These can't be actual color variants of the same product, but just for demonstration purposes, and white. And if I go ahead and I change, let's say scent, you'll see that there's no change. And this is a slight challenge because unlike the other data, which was associated with a specific variant, these media items are related to specific options. So for example, if you have media that's related to certain scents and media that's related to certain colors, how you mix and match those might be a bit of a challenge. So for example, if I'm showing, do I show the lavender main media or do I show the white main media? Or do I show a specific size main media? And that might be kind of a slight fault in how Wix has decided to set up the media versus the variants. It would be cool, I think, if the media was included with the variants as well, and you could have media for specific variants as opposed to specific options. If you know that that's possible, why don't you leave a comment and let me know? I'd love to hear that. But that's all for today. And just to recap, what we did is we fetched a specific variant based on the options that were selected, and we made changes to the UI based on that variant. In addition, we also made changes to the main media based on a specific option that was selected. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll hope to see you in the next episode.
But that's basically going to wrap it up for today's video. If you all did enjoy, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel for more Wix and Wix Studio content coming out really soon. Again, I want to give a special shout out to Eitan from the WixWiz YouTube channel. This series would not be possible without him, so I'm really appreciative for him. But thank you again for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Peace.